I have a younger brother named Hi Hi. He is 6 years old this year. His parents committed suicide not long ago, and ever since then, he's been acting very strange. He started talking and playing with things none of us could see. People say he has the Yin Yang Eyes. About half a month ago, Hi Hi's parents drove out to a dilapidated building in a desolate area and jumped from the abandoned construction site. It was an unexplained suicide. The father crashed into a slab of concrete, his brain mixed with blood, spilling across the ground. The mother was impaled by a several-meter-long steel bar and then slammed against a concrete panel. Even worse, their bodies weren't discovered until days later, by which point their corpses were in such horrifying condition they were barely recognizable. Naturally, the one I felt most sorry for was Hi Hi. He suddenly lost both of his parents and had no idea why. No one told him about how tragic their deaths were, but perhaps his instincts could feel it. Since then, he began showing strange behavior, for instance, talking and playing with invisible friends. People said he had yin yang eyes. I didn't believe it. I thought he just couldn't bear the trauma of suddenly losing his parents. But that day, he really scared me. I had just come home from work and wanted to spend some time with him. So I planned to take him outside. We happily walked down the stairs together, but when we reached the landing between the 4th and 5th floors, Hi Hi suddenly froze and refused to go any further. I asked him what was wrong. He hesitated for a while before finally whispering, "There's a scary old man standing right at the door. Sister, if you can see him, then he can see you too." Startled, I leaned over and looked into the shared hallway on the 4th floor, completely empty, not a single soul, let alone some old man. But Hi Hi insisted the man was there, looking very angry, and he was too scared to go downstairs. I couldn't convince him otherwise. I had to give up on going out and took him back inside. But something didn't sit right with me, so I stayed alert. That evening, a neighbor told me that an old man who lived alone on the 4th floor had passed away. He had been dead for more than half a day before anyone discovered him. No one noticed because he lived all alone. It wasn't until his daughter called to check on him that they broke open the door and found his body. I felt a chill run down my spine. Could it be that Hi Hi really saw him? Was that the ghost of the old man? Because I had to take care of Hi Hi, I moved in to live with him. His only remaining relative was his grandfather, but he didn't seem mentally present. Right after I got back, the old man rushed off to his hometown. Before leaving, he specifically asked me to handle the funeral arrangements for Hi Hi's parents. In his hometown, such matters were complicated and time-consuming, so he asked me to look after Hi Hi for the time being. Of course, I agreed, with my encouragement. Even though it was just the two of us, Hi Hi lived happily and gradually seemed to forget about his parents. One day, I decided to take him to the park. Instead of riding a motorbike, I chose to take the bus. It was summer, and the bus was crowded. But luckily, a kind stranger gave up their seat for Hi Hi. Hi Hi sweetly thanked them. At one stop, a middle-aged man got on the bus, dragging one leg behind him. As he walked awkwardly, he looked like he had a disability. Being a thoughtful child, Hi Hi immediately stood up and said sweetly, "Uncle, please take this seat." The man smiled kindly and replied, "You're a good boy, but sit down. I'm not actually disabled, I just had a checkup. The doctor said it's nothing serious." Hi Hi responded with an "oh," and sat back down. It seemed like nothing out of the ordinary. The man slowly walked toward the back of the bus, but then Hi Hi quietly leaned toward me and said, "Sister, I didn't give him my seat because I thought he was disabled." I was puzzled, since he had seemed very considerate. I asked, "Hi Hi, then why did you say that?" He gestured for me to lean down and speak quietly. I bent closer, And his next words sent a chill down my spine. He's holding a little child on his leg. The child's head is about to fall off. So he's walking awkwardly. I was scared the head would fall off if he kept walking, so I gave him my seat. The innocent voice of a child, combined with such chilling words, made my back break out in a cold sweat, especially when I remembered that the man had said his leg was fine. If it was fine, then why was he walking like that? Looking at the proud expression on Hai Hai's face, I began to wonder, could he really see things we couldn't? Worried that something might be wrong, I decided to take Hai Hai for a medical examination. Fortunately, I had an old friend working at a major hospital nearby. I explained Hai Hai's situation, and he referred us to a very experienced specialist, Professor Zhang. Professor Zhang was a kind and respected doctor, having practiced medicine for more than half his life. His back was slightly hunched, his hair snow-white, but his eyes were gentle and full of wisdom. He ordered a series of tests, including basic vision checks, a CT scan, and an EEG. Finally, we returned to his office with a stack of reports. Hai Hai seemed tired and sat quietly on the chair, staring at Professor Zhang without saying a word. The professor carefully read the reports, then furrowed his brows in thought. From what I can see, he said, "This child is perfectly healthy. There's nothing physically wrong with him." I hesitated. "Nothing, but he's been seeing things." Professor Zhang laughed lightly and replied in a reassuring tone, "It's nothing serious. Likely trauma from the loss of his parents. Children in such situations can experience hallucinations. Don't worry, it should gradually improve over time." With no clear result, I could only sigh. Professor Zhang looked into Hai Hai's eyes, smiling warmly as if to comfort him. But Hai Hai timidly spoke up, "Grandpa, why are you carrying a big brother on your back? If you let him down, you won't be hunchbacked anymore." His voice was innocent, pure and gentle. The professor's face instantly turned from cheerful to ghostly pale. Startled, I quickly pulled Hai Hai close, telling him not to say nonsense, but Professor Zhang was visibly shaken. His hand trembled, as if he wanted to speak, but couldn't say a word. My friend hurried us out of the office. Only when we got outside did my friend explain the reason behind Professor Zhang's reaction. Over 10 years ago, the professor's son had died of a terminal illness right in his arms. During that period, he aged drastically overnight, his hair turning completely white. Before he died, the boy had said, "I don't want to leave. I want to stay with Dad forever." Professor Zhang had nodded and replied, "Then stay. I'll carry you with me for the rest of my life." In other words, the big brother that Hai Hai saw on the professor's back was likely his dead son. No wonder the professor's demeanor changed so drastically. Since the medical checkup yielded no answers, I took Hai Hai home. His grandfather was still away handling the funeral affairs. I didn't want to burden him any further, so I didn't mention any of this, but inside, I was deeply uneasy. If science couldn't help, I had to seek another way. I asked around and found a local spirit medium. She was blind, rumor had it. She had offended a spirit in her youth. She lived close by, in an old apartment building on the 3rd floor. I brought Hai Hai to her. She stayed in a dark back room, with all the windows tightly shut. Shelves lined all 4 walls, filled with strange, unidentified artifacts. In the middle was a square table with odd objects on it. She sat at the far end. Despite her blindness, her eyes cloudy white without visible pupils, she welcomed us warmly, as if she knew we were there. Hai Hai wasn't scared at all. He obediently followed me and sat across from her. Just as I was about to speak, she raised her hand to stop me. Then she placed both hands on a small incense burner on the table and closed her eyes, chanting softly. "Hai Hai, bored? began playing with the air above the table. A few moments later, the spirit medium suddenly opened her eyes and blurted, "Yin Yang Eyes, right?" "Yes," I answered, startled because I hadn't mentioned any symptoms yet, and she had guessed it. I quickly asked, "Is there any way to help him?" She exhaled slowly, her voice calm and deep. "It's fate. Nothing can interfere with it, just wait. After a while, the boy's eyes will close on their own." Hai Hai remained silent, still playing with the invisible air. I wanted to say something, but hesitated. Then something truly chilling happened. The medium looked kindly at Hai Hai and asked, "Little one, who are you playing with?" Hai Hai stopped, looked up at her, and nodded matter-of-factly. Goosebumps rose across my skin. The spirit medium also nodded, then handed Hai Hai a talisman and gestured for us to leave. Still in a daze, I led him out the door. Once we were outside, I asked Hai Hai what she meant. He replied, "There's a pale boy sitting on the table. He's blocking the incense burner, so I only had one hand free to play." My legs nearly gave out, but thank goodness for the talisman, right? I could only hope it would have some protective power. I kept in touch with Hai Hai's grandfather through text messages. But when I told him about Hai Hai having yin yang eyes, he seemed indifferent. What an irresponsible grandfather! With no one else to rely on, I had no choice but to take full responsibility for Hai Hai myself. I never expected things to get even worse. 2 days later in the afternoon, Hai Hai went to play at our neighbor's house, the Deep family, on the 6th floor. The Deep family had 5 members. The parents ran a small business and were rarely home. The grandparents stayed behind to take care of their cute 5-year-old grandson, Chiu Fong. Hai Hai loved playing there for those 2 days. Everything seemed normal. I thought maybe the talisman had worked. After all, it was just the neighbor's house. So I stayed home to test some recipes, planning to make a nice meal. But then the tragedy happened. The grandparents were busy with chores and didn't keep a close eye on the kids. The 2 boys ran up to the rooftop of the old apartment building. The rooftop was cluttered with junk. They started playing there, pretending to be kings of the hill. No one knew why. But suddenly, Chiu Fong climbed on top of a pile of debris, stepped over the 1-meter-high railing, and jumped from the 6th floor rooftop. By the time the grandparents rushed down, the boy was already gone. I dashed upstairs to find Hai Hai sitting on the rooftop, crying. I quickly comforted him and gently asked what had happened. Through sobs, he pointed to a corner and said, "That old man. He was so scary, he grabbed Chiu Fong. Chiu Fong didn't want to go with him. So he fell." A chill ran down my spine. In that corner, there was only an old, broken wooden table. No one else was there. Even more disturbing, the protective talisman I had given Hai Hai had disappeared. I scooped him up and rushed downstairs. Later, the Deep family, who hadn't even gotten to see their son's face one last time, came to our place, devastated. They asked Hai Hai what had really happened. He timidly replied, "It was that old man, the one with the scar on his face." He threw Chiu Fong down. Immediately, all the neighbors who were present fell into stunned silence. Wasn't that the old man from the 4th floor, the one who had recently died? Hai Hai had already seen his spirit in the hallway before anyone even found his body. And yes, there had been a scar on his face. Soon, one of the neighbors pointed out that among the junk on the rooftop was a table. The very same one that belonged to that scar-faced old man. That man had always favored boys over girls. He treated his daughter terribly, to the point where she wanted nothing to do with him. That table was something she hadn't wanted to deal with after his death, so she just tossed it onto the rooftop. In life, the man had been bitter and resentful because he never had a son or grandson. Seeing other children being healthy and happy filled him with envy. That was why all the neighborhood kids were afraid of him. He had often glared at them, scaring them away. No one expected that even after death, he would still cause harm. The neighbors began whispering among themselves, saying the rooftop should be sealed off until someone found a way to deal with the spirit. I also told them how Hai Hai had seen the ghost earlier and confirmed it was likely still lingering. The neighbors were even more shocked, considering that Hai Hai had just lost both his parents, and these strange occurrences were piling up. The Deep family chose not to hold him accountable, but from that day on, Hai Hai became famous in the neighborhood. Everyone now knew he had Yin Yang Eyes. A few gossipy elders started pestering him. Even when I took him for a walk in the courtyard, they would gather around and whisper, "Child, do you see anything strange in that corner over there? There's an old man in building 4. He passed away recently. Have you seen him? My dog has been missing for a week. Do you see if it's come home?" Poor little thing. All I could do was listen and quickly pull Hai Hai away. As a result, he gradually became more withdrawn. To protect him, I told him, "From now on, don't talk to anyone but me. No matter what they ask, don't answer." He nodded obediently. Then I called Hai Hai's grandfather and told him everything. He listened patiently and seemed to understand, but only said he'd return soon. I didn't know what was keeping him so busy that even after something this serious, he still hadn't come back. And things only escalated from there. The Deep family wanted closure. They wanted answers, maybe even revenge. They asked around, consulted their connections, and eventually found a so-called spiritual master, Master Lin. It was said he was an expert in dealing with spirits and had helped many families before. That afternoon, Master Lin was brought to our rooftop. Of course, a crowd of curious neighbors followed. I couldn't leave Hai Hai home alone, so I had no choice but to quietly take him with me. Master Lin wore a long robe, had snow-white hair and beard, and exuded an air of righteousness and authority he brought along to disciples. Madame Deep wept bitterly as she recounted how her son had fallen from the rooftop, blaming the scar-faced old man for causing his death, and even pointed out the old table that once belonged to him. Master Lin carefully surveyed the scene, calculated with his fingers, then used his compass to examine everything thoroughly before setting up the ritual altar. His 2 disciples quickly assembled a simple altar with incense, candles, a small brazier, coins, and a peachwood sword. All the necessary items were present. Master Lin solemnly began the ritual, drawing amazed gasps from the surrounding crowd. Finally, he threw a talisman, and as the peachwood sword struck the old table, a black shadow suddenly appeared. I was stunned, immediately shielding Hui Hui's eyes, though he hadn't seen anything from the start. The crowd gasped softly in horror. The 2 disciples rushed forward and lit the table on fire. As the flames and smoke rose, the shadow gradually faded away. Only then did the Deep family breathe a sigh of relief. At least the vengeful spirit that had taken a life was finally vanquished, but even after the ritual was over, Master Lin still furrowed his brow. Then he suddenly turned and stared directly at us. I felt a twinge of unease under the strange gazes of those around us. Master Lin walked straight toward us. His target was clearly me, as he asked, "You're the one who came here with the boy, correct?" I quickly pulled Hui Hui behind me. Hui Hui said nothing, but gave a small nod. Master Lin paused in thought before speaking gently to me. "Don't be afraid, girl. I just want to ask the boy one question." Since he didn't seem like a bad person and had just rid us of a ghost, I cautiously let Hui Hui step out from behind me. Master Lin's brows knitted even tighter. Then he asked a strange question. "What did you see?" Hui Hui was frightened and didn't dare answer. I was about to speak up for him when Master Lin's next words stunned me silent. The child from the deep family. He's lying on your back right now. He keeps asking why you pushed him down. Can you see him? I froze. When I turned to look, Huey's expression had already changed. His face was pale, frozen, and behind him, although no one was there, I could almost see the deep boy's blood-covered figure sobbing and speaking to him. Huey began to tremble all over, then suddenly wailed out loud. I dropped to my knees and hugged him tight. I didn't know what to do, only that I needed to run. Thankfully, I still had enough strength to carry him. I picked him up and ran without looking back. Without stopping, I knew from now on, the whole world would be pointing fingers. Even if there was no evidence that Huey had done anything terrible. Even if the law didn't apply to a child like him, he would still become the target of everyone's condemnation. Fortunately, that very day, Huey's grandfather finally returned. While Huey cried himself to sleep, I told his grandfather everything that had happened over the past few days. You're listening to Yin Yang Eyes on the YouTube channel. Turn Thien Min, from the severed head inside the motorcycle helmet, the headless child on the bus, the boy clinging to Professor Zhang's back in the hospital, the ghost at the spirit medium's home, and now this incident with the Deep family. After hearing everything, Grandpa sighed deeply and said, "Zina, prepare yourself. I'm afraid we can't keep living here anymore." Just as expected, he told me to stay home and take care of Huey. While he went out alone, likely to speak with the neighbors, but we both knew it wouldn't help. Huey had already been seen as an abnormal child because of his Yin Yang eyes. No one would believe him innocent. They wouldn't listen to any explanation. I sank down on the sofa, alone in the living room. When I turned my head, I saw the bloodied forms of Huey's parents. But I wasn't afraid. I got up, fetched a glass of water, and sat calmly back down on the couch. Their blood-drenched faces were indeed horrifying. Their eyes looked onto mine, full of accusation. Still, I felt no fear, because the one who truly had the Yin Yang eyes wasn't Huey, it was me. Facing these two malevolent spirits, I even dared to speak first. "Why are you back?" They didn't reply. "That's fine," I continued. "You came back at the perfect time. Take a good look. I've already ruined your son. He'll live in torment for the rest of his life," I said, my voice trembling with rage as I sipped my water. Memories came flooding back. Huey called me Sister Zina, though I wasn't actually family. I was just a distant relative from the countryside. Poor, so poor that I didn't even finish primary school. Later, Huey's family needed someone to cook and look after the child. So I was brought here. His parents were doing well in business. Don't let this old apartment complex fool you. It was part of a prime real estate zone, right in the city center. Housing prices here were astronomical. Huey's father. He was the epitome of a successful man, handsome, confident, and capable, everything I dreamed of in a man. We got along well. I treated him like a trusted older brother. I consulted him before making any decisions. He was always kind to me, even attentive. Things continued like that until the summer of last year. One rainy night, Huey's mother had taken him to a summer camp. His grandfather was still away in the countryside. He came home soaking wet, reeking of alcohol. I pitied him. I rushed to get him dry clothes, hot water, and a towel. But then, he pulled me to the bed, pinned me down. I struggled with all my might, but his strong arms held me in place. He tore off my clothes, and did it. I cried the entire night. The next morning, I was ready to report him to the police. But when he woke up, he knelt before me in tears, begging for forgiveness. He said he hadn't meant to, he'd just lost control. He claimed he no longer loved his wife, that he had long harbored feelings for me, and I wavered. Because I'd seen it myself, there was little affection left between him and his wife. They treated each other like distant acquaintances. He asked me to give him time. He promised to divorce her and marry me. I believed him, but the dream didn't last long. I got pregnant, not wanting my child to be born out of wedlock. I told Hui's father. He told me to get rid of it. When I refused, he tried sweet-talking me. I still wouldn't give in, so he resorted to something despicable. He drugged me. I lost the baby just 2 months into the pregnancy, and I fell seriously ill. He told his family I had other things going on and couldn't continue working. That's when I realized he wanted to erase me from his life completely. While I was sick, he even blocked my number. That's when I finally woke up, so all along, he had just been lying to me. All he ever wanted was my young body. When I became a problem, he quickly severed ties and kicked me out without hesitation. All those sweet promises were just honeyed lies. But how could I let go so easily? I rested for a few months, bought a burner SIM card, and contacted him again. I sent him the intimate photos I'd secretly taken of us together. He was furious, completely lost his temper, but he still came to see me. This time, I wanted him to fall, to destroy the perfect family facade he'd worked so hard to maintain. Because I didn't just contact him, I contacted Hui's mother too. That night, the moon was somber and heavy. I arranged to meet him somewhere secluded on the rooftop of an abandoned, unfinished building. I went with the mindset that if worst came to worst, we'd die together. But I didn't expect him to be so cold, so dismissive. He just looked at me with disgust and asked how much money I wanted to permanently delete the photos. I laughed bitterly. Luckily, I had secretly texted Hui's mother to come, but I hadn't expected that when she arrived, she wouldn't even try to understand. She simply rushed over and slapped me several times, dazing me. She screamed like a wounded beast, but clearly, I was the one most hurt. Her words were so different from her usual cold and distant demeanor. Cheap slut, home-wrecking fox spirit. She didn't blame her husband at all. She just cursed and kept hitting me, while he stood by watching silently. When he finally got tired of it, he just stepped aside and lit a cigarette. Furious, I fought back, and I won. I pushed her off the rooftop, the 8th floor. It was a secluded area. Behind the window was a deserted construction site. Nothing but concrete and steel bars below. It was so dark I couldn't see clearly, but once she fell, there was no sound at all. After finishing his cigarette, he walked over and asked in annoyance if we were done fighting. He saw only me standing at the edge of the rooftop and asked what had happened. I looked up at the man who had ruined the first half of my life. I couldn't let him ruin the second half. Before he could react, I summoned all my strength and shoved him hard. He didn't even have time to scream. I only heard a dull thud as he hit the ground. Luckily, it was a remote place. I squatted at the rooftop's edge, letting the cold wind blow through me, and cried. For a long time afterward, I came to a decision. I wouldn't let them destroy me. I went downstairs, but saw something terrifying. The two of them, blood pouring from their heads, waiting for me at the bottom. I was paralyzed with fear. Only when they began whispering by my ears, "We won't let you go, not even in death," that I realized they'd turned into ghosts. That's when I remembered. When I was young, I used to have Yin Yang eyes too. My grandmother had sealed them shut, but maybe, because of this trauma, those eyes had opened again. I stood up and said to them coldly, "Then I'll make sure even in death, you'll never rest. He killed my child, I'll never forgive him." And I'll make sure your child never knows peace for the rest of his life. With vengeance burning in my heart, I walked away with absolute resolve. The next day, I paid special attention to the news. But there was nothing, no report of their bodies being found. On the third day, then the fourth, they were finally discovered. But by then, their bodies had already started decomposing. No evidence was left at the scene to prove I had ever been there. They had died in a remote, abandoned site thousands of miles away. The police ruled it a double suicide, and so I returned to the Hui household, offering comfort to the grieving grandfather and volunteering to care for Hui Hui. He knew nothing. And after years of living together, he trusted me completely. Everything was going just as I had planned, step by step, until now. Here I sit on this sofa and I've won. I don't know how these ghosts found their way back here, logically. Their corpses had been cremated so far away. How could they return? But even if they did, it didn't matter. I'd already accomplished everything I wanted. I never imagined things would go this smoothly. Hui Hui had a negligent grandfather, perfect. Even though I had to kill one neighborhood child along the way, it was worth it. That dead kid still haunts me, constantly asking why I pushed him. But that's fine, his death was a worthy sacrifice. After he died, I started subtly planting the idea in Hui Hui's mind that he was the one responsible. I wove stories, reinforcing the idea that Hui Hui had Yin Yang Eyes. The whole apartment complex believes he's a murderer. 10 people tell 10 more, and eventually the whole world will see him as a monster. I want him haunted by nightmares for the rest of his life. And if he ever gets better, I'll show up again to make the nightmares start all over. This is my revenge. This is the offering I make to the innocent child I lost. Why should my child die while that boy gets to live a peaceful life? I gleefully told the ghostly couple everything I'd done to their beloved son. I spoke with joy, even burst into laughter. Though they didn't react from beginning to end, I kept talking. Until the door suddenly swung open, I turned and saw someone unexpected, Hui Hui's grandfather. Hadn't he taken Hui Hui to another house? I jumped up in fake surprise. Grandpa, didn't you take Hui Hui out? He glanced at me, then turned to the 2 ghosts. But there was supposed to be no one there. He looked back at me and calmly asked, Miss Zina, do you know what I've been doing these past few days before I came back? I smiled, shook my head, and pretended to stay calm. I've been investigating who murdered my son and daughter-in-law. At that moment, dread swept through me still. I pretended to be shocked. But didn't Hui Hui's parents? Didn't they commit suicide? Grandfather shook his head and continued. Do you know why I was so calm when I heard Hui Hui had Yin Yang Eyes? Then he turned again to look at the 2 silent ghosts. His next words explained everything. Because I have them too. I froze. Thank you for your confession, he said. Now everything is clear. He pointed to a corner of the TV stand. I looked closer, a hidden camera. Everything I'd said had likely been recorded. He must have been watching, and only came in once he heard it all. But I told myself, it's fine, let them think I'm crazy. Without proof, what can they do? I dropped the act, laughed out loud. Grandpa, you're truly more cunning than I thought. You brought these ghosts here just so I'd confess, didn't you? He remained cold and silent, trying hard to suppress his fury. I lazily stretched and slumped back onto the sofa, grinning. But what can you do to me? You have no evidence. What do you tell the police? That the ghosts made me confess enough, he said in a voice so calm it was terrifying. Their souls, their 7 spirits and 3 ethereal parts, have long been torn apart. When I found them, they couldn't even be called ghosts anymore. Otherwise, I wouldn't have waited for you to confess yourself." He looked at me, his voice calm but cold. I glanced at the ghost couple, intrigued. So that's why ... No wonder they had just stood there frozen the entire time. If they still had their souls, they would have been roaring with rage, tearing me to shreds, even if they couldn't actually do it. But I spent so much time. Was it all for nothing? I asked, my voice rising. I planned every step of my revenge. Are you telling me it was meaningless? Grandfather nodded slowly. Don't worry. It won't be in vain. Hui has me. The boy will be just fine. Then he added quietly, "You have no idea what it means to grow old with Yin Yang Eyes. You don't know the kind of things I've endured." His words made me pause. A sense of unease crept in. And right at that moment, the ghost couple's horrific expressions began to change. Their entire bodies started to tremble violently. What's happening? I asked, stepping back. Grandfather's voice remained steady. "I spent all this time gathering the broken souls of my son and daughter-in-law, and turned them into a curse that would let them carry out their own revenge." My blood ran cold. I tried to stand up, to run, but it was already too late. The two wraiths lunged at my face with terrifying speed. "From now on, they will haunt you in the endless void. They will torment you. They will make you suffer a pain that never ends. You won't be able to live, and you won't be able to die." That was the last thing I heard, because the next moment, the two vengeful spirits burrowed straight into my head. And everything went dark. My eyes turned pitch black.